Wanted to get somebody on talk about a follow-up to our housing conversation. So really smart guy when it comes to housing and density and what we need in urban environments. Dean Tester joins us. Really happy that he makes his Toronto Today debut. And similar to Mike Moffat, who comes to us from Ottawa, but who also teaches at Western in London, just smart stuff, knows the demographics, knows the rhythm of what's needed in our major cities. And Toronto's one of them, and Ottawa is certainly one of them. So we get into those issues, rooming houses, density, NIMBYism, all of that. It's affecting all of us. And our moods are probably also being affected by our property values being a bit lower than what they were last month compared to the month before, and the month before that, and the month before that. So that conversation with Dean Tester right now on Toronto Today. We think rooming house and we're like, what, a boarding house, or people just coming for days at a time and taking, coming and going. But when you think rooming house, you do think that experience when maybe a couple couples are living together or student roommates and whatnot. And that really does open up the housing market and helps people who own make decisions about whether they want to rent their house out or not. And it makes neighborhoods more dense. And that's what we're gunning for, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think back to when I was in university, I had 4 or 5 roommates at a time, and I think that's a pretty common experience. What people do is they live where they can afford, right? Mm-hmm. And if you think of a city like Toronto, young families are fleeing the city in droves right now. They're leaving for wherever they can afford. They're driving until they qualify for a mortgage. A lot of young people, if they want to stay in the city, if that's where their school is, if that's what their job is, they're going to do what they have to make ends meet. And that often means pairing up with multiple roommates.
Have you had a good look at the Toronto plan? And it's seen as being bold and outside the box. And yes, it does come on the heels of a lot of contentiousness of questioning the democratic nature of the strong mayor powers that John Tory went to Doug Ford and asked for. But even a lot of Tory's critics for this, that, and the other thing aren't criticizing this plan. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think it's a huge step in the right direction. I mean, we've dragged our heels on this for it seems like decades, and that's not just a Toronto problem. That's province-wide. But I think John Tory's really seen the light. He's moving forward on this in a very positive way. I think all the efforts to broadly make zoning more permissive and allow more forms of housing are very good. Ending exclusionary zoning, which is basically the process by which the city keeps certain types of people out of neighborhoods. It sounds really unseemly because it is. That's what we've been doing for decades. Taking the first steps to end that, I think that's a huge step in the right direction, and I really applaud the City of Toronto and John Tory for making that move, because it is politically difficult.
You've taken, and I think fairly, because I'm trying to weigh all sides of it, you've taken a run at a few politicians for basically them being very NIMBYist, very exclusionary. One councillor in Mississauga complaining about student housing in Mississauga. The mayor of Aurora doesn't want this built or that built or this built. And I think these things are fair. There isn't a lot of open-mindedness. And at the end of the day, we elected these people. There are tax dollars by which suburbs like Mississauga and Aurora exist, and they're not exactly making things affordable for residents.
Yeah, and so again, this is a common problem across the province, where if you're a politician and you're presented with a group of 20 neighbors who are opposed to a new a small apartment building or a duplex or something going up in their neighborhood because it's a little different from what they're used to, it's very easy as a local politician to say, oh, these angry people are at my door, I'm going to be on their side, right? But the impact of that happening over and over and over and over again is that we've had such a difficult time getting housing built across the GTA and across the province. We are in a massive housing deficit. We are probably a decade behind on housing construction where we should be compared to the population we have. And the problem in the GTA has spilled over to the rest of the province, where now cities like Ottawa, where I live, are being expected to add 150,000 people over the next 10 years. 150,000 housing units over the next 10 years, whereas over the past 2010, we added about 60 or 70, I think. So, it's people are fleeing Toronto. The young families are the only population that's declining in the city of Toronto. And then you have suburbs like Mississauga, where the population is actually declining in that city because they're not building housing and because it's getting so unaffordable to live there. They've just made it so exclusive to live in that city. It's unfathomable to me to that being that close to Toronto, having that many jobs, having that many amenities accessible to you, and you've allowed your population to decline because you don't want more neighbors.
Well, and I brought this up to Bradford yesterday, Dean, is that student housing factors in as well. I thought Sabrina Maddow made a great point in the National Post saying the universities collect all this international tuition money. 61 grand is the undergrad tuition at U of T. And I bet you where you are in Ottawa and Carleton, it's not much less than that. So what is the university doing with those dollars to make sure those students have proper accommodation? How are they filtering that money back into the infrastructure? And if they don't, by the way, we're going to start to lose those students. And we'll lose, by the way, undergrad students, period. It's expensive to go to school in Toronto and Ottawa, more so than a Windsor or a Hamilton or a London right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's hugely beneficial to the Canadian economy to bring in international students, to bring in more immigrants. We have job vacancies in almost every field. We have labor shortages, right? We need these people to come here to Canada to work and help make this country a better place. But the challenge is, we've got, hundreds of thousands of international students coming. We've got 400,000 up to 500,000 new immigrants coming to Canada a year, and we are not building any housing for them. And it's, they're struggling. People who have lived here for generations are struggling. Their children are struggling. We're all impacted by this housing market. And, I think of, obviously myself, I've got I've just recently been married. We're looking at buying our first house. I consider myself very fortunate. A substantial earner would be in, the top, 80 or 90% of earners. Mm-hmm. And I still can't afford a house, right? And I'm competing for a rental with, single moms and students and people who are just starting their careers. And, that's extremely frustrating for everyone because they can't afford a house that they want. Mm-hmm. I can't afford a house for the type of life I want. And everyone is just feeling the impact up and down the line. And you think of like our grandparents, like they can't downsize into a house that's appropriate for them because that's more expensive than living where they are now.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Dean Tester's our guest, co-founder of Make Housing Affordable. He's joining us from Ottawa today, but we're talking a ton about the GTA. I got about a minute here, so you can stretch this out. What is the message to people who do say, who do have a little bit of a NIMBYist profile? I think it's fair to say, hey, I don't want 9 students living next to me. We're a quiet, you're a retired couple. We don't want big parties, garbage on the lawn, 5 cars in the driveway. They do get a say, but at the end of the day, progress is progress in some of these cities.
Mm-hmm. I would say, we live in cities, we live in communities. We have to be welcoming of neighbors, and we have to allow this sort of gentle density of 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings in every neighborhood. Or else what you're going to end up with is towers in every neighborhood because there's no middle ground here. We have to build housing. There is no acceptable solution where we don't build housing, and you're going to have to fit some of that in your community. It can't be in someone else's community. It has to be in every community. So we all got to work together to make this happen.
Hey, Dean, great stuff. I hope you can come on again, and I appreciate you getting up early for us. Thanks very much for the time, and good luck, and let's stay in touch on this.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
Awesome to have you. Dean Tester,